What's up, dudes? Max here, back with a quick update for Mortal Kombat 11 again. Based on that gameplay we had over the previous couple of days, there's been some interesting developments in terms of the characters that might potentially show up in the game. Some very obvious hints and semi-reveals, and others that some people might not have picked up on, and this is kind of a quick compilation of what all of those are as of, around January 19th, 2019. We're going to quickly know more all about this just as an update because the first combat cast for Mortal Kombat 11 is going to be happening at the end of the month, and there's a good chance one of these characters is going to be in there. At least, as we said, it was heavily hinted. So here's the core roster we have as of right now. A total of 7 characters between Baraka, Sonya, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Raiden, Scarlet, and Garrus. And the total amount of roster slots that are showing right now is 25. The developers have also had interviews talking about, characters and what characters will be in it, and even some of them have gone on and said that 25 seems like a fairly safe bet, but no actual confirmations was coming from any of the developers. At least we're getting a decent idea of what and how many characters are going to be in the game. But, like I said, plenty of other hints and plenty of other direct demonstrations have happened, and I think we got a pretty good idea that we can fill this thing out fairly well as of right now. The first few come from a behind-the-scenes interview with several directors, as well as producers and artists on Mortal Kombat 11, and there is absolutely a whole bunch of hints in here, and things that some people might not have seen. Cassie Cage is the first one, which appears to be her character intro and a redesign for the character. That is either one of the biggest hints possible or a practical small confirmation. Now, the interesting thing is her dialogue during this is referencing another character,
Kitana, Empress of the Dead.
And yes, there is another fairly good chance that Kitana will be another returning cast member, which isn't all too surprising either. Outside of that, and seen during the story trailer, there are other characters that have a very good chance of making it in. Specifically, 2 that got a lot of screen time within that trailer, which was Liu Kang as well as Kung Lao. There's even a cool sequence where you see the Revenant versions of Kung and Liu fighting their past versions. And the reason all of this is happening is that Mortal Kombat 11's story is entirely focusing around time travel and the fact that the events of old Mortal Kombat are going to need to be revisited. So that makes a lot of sense why Baraka's in the game, because we saw his ass get totally murdered in Mortal Kombat X. I'm sorry if that was a spoiler. Speaking of time travel, there's another good chance that we're going to be getting the boss character of this game, which is by the name of Kronika, as a fully playable character amongst the roster. This isn't that much different as we saw in Mortal Kombat X. Shinnok was indeed the final boss of the game. Corrupted Shinnok was kind of unique and he wasn't directly playable, but Shinnok was a playable character in MKX. However, Shao Kahn wasn't exactly the same in Mortal Kombat 9. He was kind of relegated to just being a boss. However, there has been a lot of interviews with developers since that time of the character being initially revealed in the story, and there's been many discussions that she is going to be playable in some fashion, so there's a good chance we're going to get Kronika to take up one of those character slots. Next up is Kabal, and Kabal was directly referenced from the developers in terms of the combat cast, like the one I was saying just earlier. They even demoed through a very quick moment one of his special moves that if you've ever played Mortal Kombat games before, you've been hit by and frustrated by if you've ever played against Kabal. We're going to be seeing a lot more of this guy very soon, so that's another character slot taken up by a classic character that a lot of people have been asking to come back for quite a long time. These few other ones do have direct references in the current build of Mortal Kombat 11. When you're going around the menus, the different modes that are available have menu art specifically referencing characters and showing them in some fashion. And I would be very surprised because many of them have characters that are already in the game, while some are demoing and showing off characters that have not actually been revealed yet. And since we could freely search around these modes, they seem like pretty big references, so I don't know why they would put characters that are not playable in all these modes, but for some reason they are there, and they're definitely worth talking about. The first one is this image featuring what looks to be Kano going up against Cassie Cage. This Cassie Cage costume does also resemble the one that we did see in-game, so that makes a lot of sense. But there is also a Kano-like character, or what resembles to be a younger version of Kano. There was a rumor a lot earlier about Kano's son being in the game, and I think someone just saw Kano looking a lot different and a lot younger. But who knows? I would like to think that Kano is most likely his time-traveled version, his younger variation. and that would make a lot more sense than Kano's son. Either way, I could be wrong, but I think adding Kano to this list is also a pretty good probability. In another mode, you have a character back-facing, and this should look fairly familiar, because anyone who's been kind of familiar with Mortal Kombat games from 9 and some of the previous ones, this is absolutely Rain. And there's a good chance Rain's going to be in the game. I think there's been references from Ed on Twitter in many ways, and even Sonic Fox when he was going up against several players over at the Mortal Kombat 11 Reveal Tournament. He specifically put Rain as his main in Mortal Kombat 11. Either that was a complete flub by someone on the tech part of the stream, or no one noticed that the character isn't in the game, or he's just trying to be cheeky about it and knows that Rain's going to be in the game and he's going to be maining that character. Outside of that, there's some fairly interesting stuff that happens in the Towers of Time game mode, which is kind of the new combat towers that you're going to be presented with in Mortal Kombat 11. And some very interesting imagery that isn't too big and you kind of have to use your imagination, but is clear enough to see exactly what they're intending. The first one is a countdown timer with a character on it that everyone's going to remember and is one of my personal favorite, Noob Saibot. Why they would exactly be referencing this character, I don't know, but for some reason his imagery is present in the game, which is hopefully good news for anyone else that's a Noob Saibot fan like myself, so I'm kind of excited about this one. But the other one that could potentially be a deconfirmation of characters does show up in another tower that people have gotten footage of, and that has modifiers, if not assists, from other characters in it. So if you remember with Injustice 2, you can kind of like bring in another character and use their move for a little bit. It's kind of similar to that, but this one was specifically featuring some characters directly from MKX and their artwork from MKX. With Sector and his net, you saw Reptile and his like gloopy fireball orb, Rain and his capture bubble, as well as Shinnok and his funky bone hand do show up. And you don't see the characters themselves, like I said, you see just their special moves show up. So they did take the time to go through the effects of their special moves. But the fact that we're seeing MKX versions of these characters in this artwork could potentially mean something, and the interesting one here especially is Rain. And I'm very curious because Rain does definitely appear to be in one of the other game mode menus, but here he's MKX version, so there could be a decent chance that the artwork presented in these game modes might just be there to throw us for a loop, because the other one, it's kind of hard to pull a conclusion on this image specifically, which also comes from the menus. This does kind of look like somewhat of a generic Mortal Kombat ninja that doesn't have much of an identity, but at the same time, it definitely could be interpreted as being Smoke, or at least human Smoke. But like I said, I think some of this, if not this image, is a bit sort of left to interpretation. So there's a chance that these might not be confirmations, at least they're little hints in some way. But other stuff is lining up, the way Cassie Cage looks in that brief interview and the way that she looks in this artwork does make a lot of sense. Also, during the stage selection, you do see that Shang Tsung has a stage kind of named after him, and I don't think that's a direct confirmation. There have been stages that kind of model after other characters, but considering we're going back in time in the story, I think there's a fairly good chance that we're going to have Shang Tsung appear in some way, because he is very pivotal to the story of Mortal Kombat, and of course he was a classic character that was absolutely missing from MKX, so I think this is a small hint that Shang Tsung could be showing up in some way, and a good chance that he will be playable. And last but not least, the biggest hint came from, once again, that interview video and behind the scenes. And if you look very specifically on the monitors of the developers, as well as some of the shots in certain angles, you can get a pretty good hint at what Johnny Cage is going to look like in Mortal Kombat 11. Of course, he's redesigned, and that once again leads a bit more probability to him being a character in the game, because we're going to be seeing characters, like I said, going through timeline stuff. And I think Johnny Cage being in the game just makes a lot of sense. His character artwork in one of these shots is also presented in something that very much looks like the in-game assets where the characters are fighting in some way. So let's go ahead and say that Johnny Cage has a pretty damn good chance of showing up in the game. So here you have it. If we're taking all those characters we just mentioned and we inject them into the roster of the game right now, this is what we are looking at. However, some of these don't have direct confirmations yet, and some of them sort of have information leading one way or the other, and these are sort of deconfirms. I'm going to highlight the ones in blue that I think have a good chance of making it, and the ones in red that could kind of be up in the air right now, but at least we get a pretty good idea of what could be composing the roster in Mortal Kombat 11. My impressions of this are all kind of lukewarm right now. I'm very curious to see what direction they're going to be taking, but it absolutely does look like they're interested in bringing back characters that were sort of missing from Mortal Kombat X especially. But we'll see. I would love to see some classic characters come back, and I know a lot of people would. The thing I want the most, though, is a very engaging roster, and not a lot of people loved the kids from Mortal Kombat X, especially. My favorite was Takeda out of the few, and Cassie Cage definitely looks like she has a place because she was the most story relevant, if you know what I mean, so I think she makes a lot of sense too. As always, dudes, let me know what you think about this in the comments below, especially with the characters that are in here, at least the ones that are being teased, if not potentially showing up. Which ones would you be looking forward to? Are you as big of a Noob Saibot and Smoke fan as I? And I'm very much hoping those two make it into the game. As always, dudes, thank you a ton for watching. I'll be back with more updates and breakdowns of Mortal Kombat gameplay that I did capture at the event as soon as possible. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.